there's an economic loss. We would have had a tremendous injection of visitors, of opportunities for local businesses to showcase themselves, for musicians and artists to play at events. It would have been so amazing with Plan A. And instead, we're doing Plan B, which, frankly, it's a different kind of amazing. This convention is anchored in Milwaukee. It will showcase Milwaukee and Wisconsin. And because it's virtual, it's a convention across America. So we'll have voices from every corner of the country, an amazing array of talent, of different stories that the country needs to hear. I'm very excited about it. And one thing that I think is possible because of this format is that we're running trainings every day for thousands of volunteers in every corner of America to get involved in fighting to win the election and elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's something that's a silver lining for this format of convention.
Well, give us a sense of that battle for the election come November in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is something of an unusual state. It went Democrat for a while, then it went Republican. You had a Republican governor. You had the Speaker of the House was was Republican from Wisconsin. Where is Wisconsin right now? Is it as divided as it appears to be?
If there were a free and fair election held today, I have no doubt in my mind that Trump would lose and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would win here. This is a state that has, for a long time, been on a kind of knife's edge. It was the closest state in the country in 2004, the second closest in 2000. You might remember Florida that year. 3 out of the last 5 presidential elections, it's had an under 1 percentage point margin of victory. And what's striking is how the polls and all of the research and voter contact we're doing demonstrate how much Wisconsin has now rejected Trump and the GOP, especially because of their failure to confront this crisis and the economic fallout and the fallout for schools and the ongoing crisis of racism. So it is, I think, right now actually pretty ready to move and change our national leadership. But every election season, it turns into a battle royale. And that's in part because the GOP, when Scott Walker was governor, they kind of seized control of the mechanics of the election, imposed one of the most restrictive voter ID laws in the country, made it so you have to upload a photo of your voter ID to request an absentee ballot to the address where you've already furnished your ID in order to register to vote. They put in place all these things that make it tougher to be able to win, even if the public's with us. And so we're going to fight like we're 2 points behind, even if the polls show we're winning in a landslide.
Well, tell us about that 2 points behind, because Wisconsin, like many states, Wisconsin is not just one monolith at all. And there are reports that basically the Democrats win the cities for the most part, and the rural areas go for Republicans. And then you have the suburbs that are sort of in play between the two. Is that a fair description of Wisconsin?
It's a little more complicated than that in Wisconsin because especially there are some rural areas that have deep progressive roots. And I say progressive advisedly, the birthplace of the progressive movement. And in fact, the birthplace of the Republican Party as a radical anti-slavery party is in small town Wisconsin. If you look in western Wisconsin, southwest Wisconsin, there's this big area called the Driftless area that wasn't smoothed over by glaciers. That area has tons of small farms, and it has voted for Democratic candidates for president over and over and over. 2016 was the exception, but we won that region back in 2018, and we just showed again in our spring Supreme Court race this year that there are a bunch of mostly rural counties that Democrats can win. In other parts of the state, it is about compressing Trump's margins in rural areas and in the suburbs around Milwaukee, which are some of the deepest red areas, and then blowing the roof off with turnout in major cities, including Madison and Milwaukee, but also cities like Eau Claire, smaller cities around the state where there are a ton of Democratic voters who want something better than what we've got right now from Trump.
So if we come down to what you call a knife's edge in Wisconsin, what will tip it one way or the other? What's the issue, in your opinion, because you know the voters in Wisconsin so well, would cause them to go for Donald Trump or for Joe Biden?
If this were before COVID, I could have pointed to a suite of issues, starting with the crisis of dairy farming and agriculture in our state that Trump has exacerbated. We lost 10% of our dairy farmers last year before coronavirus. Gun violence, Trump's abandonment of communities across the state. But now everything goes through the prism of this pandemic. This is a president who, because he retreated from any kind of serious leadership on the world stage, failed to help China and other countries control the pandemic before it reached us here, as happened several times during the Obama administration successfully with pandemics in different countries. It's a president who once the pandemic arrived on our shores, buried his head in the sand, promoted quack cures that didn't work, and refused to test everyone, which could have helped us get it under control. So now we have this crisis in our economy, this crisis of children not being able to go to school, including my children. It's affecting every person's life. And until we get a president who believes in science and can competently manage a government response to a crisis, it's not getting better. That is the thing that is the threshold test for the president. Can you rise to a crisis? Trump has failed that test, and every issue that every person cares about, ultimately, we can only make progress when we get coronavirus under control.